Hi, welcome to another video from SQL Maestros. The other day, I recorded a video live on production server where I demonstrated a specific query was constantly doing physical I/O, even in subsequent executions, which means whenever you run it, it was always reading data from the disk, which means fetching data pages from the data file, which means that the data pages were not being cached in the buffer pool. And when you take that query and run it on the same box with another database context, everything was fine, which is the data was being cached in the buffer pool. There were solutions and recommendations to that, but the finding was interesting. And because we found out that there could be some pressing issues with the memory, we investigated further as to why this phenomenon behaves differently in one database versus another database on the same box. So here is the second video in a series, if you may say so, where I am going to show you another phenomenon. Now, today's concept is about plan cache bloating, which is unrelated to the learnings that we saw in the other video, but you may want to go and watch that first video and then come over to this one to kind of get a sense of what we are dealing with. But because both the concepts are unrelated, you might as well watch this one and then go and make sure watch the first one. So let's jump over to this demo. I'm going to use AdventureWorks 2016 for the purpose of the demo, and we will free the proc cache here. And now you know why I can't run this demo on the live production server. So let's free the proc cache, and here is a simple select statement that we fire with one predicate, that is last name is equal to Duffy. You get the result set there with 2 records. Now what we want to do is find out how many execution plans do we have in the plan cache. In other words, let's first look at the query statistics as to how many entries do we have for this specific query in the query stats DMV. So from the query stats DMV, I am going to do a cross apply with SQL text, and I've put a filter here to just kind of extract the stats information for this specific query. So let's go and execute this, and this is what you get. This is the text, this is the handle, and you know query stats DMV is overwhelming with a lot of metadata. What we are interested in amongst other items there is something called as a query hash. Each query internally inside the SQL Server relational engine has a query hash, which is like the hash value of the query itself. If I copy this and I put this here to find out how many entries do I have for this specific query hash. So let's do a count start from query stats and see that there's only one entry. Remember, we ran this specific query only once. Okay, fine, there is one entry. Let's find out how many plans do we have for this query. So I'm going to take up this hash and replace it here as well. And let's go and look into the number of plans. So you can see that there is only one plan for the query. Everything looks good at this point. I'm going to cut this and put it next here so that I can just run both of them together. Now let's run this query again. I run it once again and then I run it a second time. Let's go and look into the query stats here now and see that there is only one entry, and of course you will see that there is only one plan. All looks good. Now we are going to make some changes to the query, very trivial. So instead of Duffy, I just put Duffy 1. We're just changing the parameter value there, and I'm going to execute this. Let's go and look into the number of entries in query stats. As you do that, you can see now the number of entries are 2. The interesting thing is, for the same query hash now, you have 2 entries in query stats. But then our concern is the query plan. Is this the same in the query plan? So in the plan cache, do we have 2 plans or 1 plan for the same query hash? Let's go and execute this, and you see now that there are 2 plans in the plan cache. Let's do one more change in the query. You can see the select statement is not well formatted, so it is small s. Let me just make it as capital select, right? Or just change any text value out there. So let's go and execute this, and let's run both of them together again and see how many entries do we have. Now for the same query, we have 3 entries into query stats and we have 3 query plans, which means for the same query hash, you have 3 I mean, SQL Server is internally treating it as 3 separate queries, though their query hashes are same. Now, this is a typical, very academic example of what plan cache bloating is. There could be multiple reasons, multiple factors why a single query can have multiple plans. Remember, 2 things I showed you right here, which is if you have a query coming in from a client application with variety of parameter values, it could be thousands, and SQL Server is creating one plan for each parameter value. That is probably the worst scenario you could encounter in plan cache bloating. The other is you can say that internally SQL Server treats the query when it is forming the plan. The incoming text has to be textually identical for the relational engine to reuse a plan that is already available in the plan cache. If we just change one character, which means it is textually not identical, and then it lands up creating another execution plan. But mind you, the hash value of the query is same, and that's why we can do a group by on query hash etc. to find out how many such plans exist, and we can probably filter on the plan count etc. Now, there could be other reasons as well. For example, if the same query comes with different set of session options like set ANSI nulls etc., and you have another session with another set of set options, that will also treat this particular query differently. Though the hash value may be same, you will have another plan. Likewise, there are things to do with users and schemas and a couple of those reasons. But what was very evident in that production box, which we are troubleshooting at this point, even while I speak to you, is the number of parameter values that are, and the variety is huge. So one of the workloads, one of the queries had more than 10,000 plans, and there were a couple of them with more than 5,000 plans. Huge plan cache bloating scenario. So there could be fixes to this. Any solution is not 100% fix, just to call that out. So optimize for ad hoc workload could be one which may fix some bit of it, maybe bring down the CPU, but not really the memory part. Then you might have force parameterization. That could be another way of fixing this, but then may lead to parameter sniffing issues. The other thing that comes to my mind is fixing the query from the client app, which is parameterizing the SQL statements. Now, if you see here, the queries are not parameterized. That's why SQL Server internally is not parameterizing the query. It is treating every statement exclusively with its own parameter value. So there are a couple of things that can be done, but besides whatever the solution is, please be aware that plan cache bloating can have severe impact on SQL Server's memory performance. And this is all about memory. A bit to do with CPU also, because for each incoming query, SQL Server is compiling a new plan, which is a CPU intensive process. And that's of course not good. So kind of interrelated with CPU as well as memory. With this, hope the learning was good. So this is plan cache bloating video. Take care of it. Try to find out whether for a single query, do you have multiple plans in the plan cache. On SQL Maestros, I will just blog about and put down a query that you can use to find out how many plans are available for a given query hash. You could just simply do a group by on the query hash and get the count, something like that. Well, with this, thanks for watching. On SQLmaestros.com, you have more videos. Consider becoming a free member so you have access to the full video library. We are constantly coming up with events each month. So check out our events section and live streaming section. There are masterclasses and video courses as well in case you wish to subscribe and enroll. I'm available on _Bansal Twitter handle for any Q&A or clarification. If you like the video, do share it with your friends and colleagues. See you soon in another video. Goodbye.